Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to say hello to those who are on the webcast as well. Hope you're doing as good as you possibly can. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Mr. Kevin Call for the opportunity to be with you again. I was just here 2 weeks ago, so I hope you don't get sick of me. But that was wonderful music. That was so great, Laura. Your beautiful voice and very meaningful. I think it touches all of us because of the things that we go through, and we certainly can appreciate that, considering what Mr. Call was talking about with all the people that have passed away and gone on, and it's hard to think about all those people. I knew a lot of people down in Tennessee and Kentucky, where we used to be, and I always hate going to funerals. We need to do that, but it's just sometimes that sad thing is left behind, So anyway, we all have other things that we're dealing with too. The sermon will touch on a lot of that today, and hopefully it'll be very helpful. Getting some help today, I have a PowerPoint, and Maya's going to be helping me with that. So you have a handout there which has all the scriptures. If you didn't get a copy, then you can pick one up after services today. It's got all the scriptures on it, but all the scriptures will be up on the screen, as well as other images. So just relax, sit back and absorb. You don't have to turn to the Bible. You could just concentrate on the message. I know it's hard to do that. As I get older, I'm like, how do I get to that page? It's harder to turn things. And so I appreciate what Mr. Call's message, about aging. I'll be 75 this month, and I notice it's not easy as it used to be. My dad was, when he was my age, I'd go and visit him and help him with things around the house and the yard, and I'd pick up something, and I'd had to pick it up, and he'd say, "John, that's too heavy for you. You can't," I was like 40 years old or 50 or whatever. I'd pick it up, no problem. He could hardly lift it, because of his age. He was about my age. And I'm feeling the same thing now. I can't lift up things. Linda says, "Can you haul this out of here?" Well, if you take half of it out, I'll be able to maybe lift it. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure you all understand that system, But the title of the sermon today is How You Can Be of Good Cheer. Now, when we come here, you guys are the most cheerful congregation we've ever visited, But we can all appreciate how we can do that even better. So, in John 16, verse 33, you don't need to turn there. We'll see that on the handout a little later. But Jesus Christ encouraged his disciples to be of good cheer. And that's the title of the sermon. So let's learn how we can better follow his advice, how it can benefit us significantly as we live our Christian lives. But first, before covering that topic, let's consider an event that occurred during World War II. You're going to get a little history lesson here. I like to do that from time to time. That can illustrate this point of being cheerful. Which involves, of course, optimism and confidence and courage in the face of real difficult trials many times. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, what was also called Operation Overlord, which was in which an Allied military force of 150,000 soldiers, 7,000 ships, and 11,000 aircraft assaulted the 50 miles of France's Normandy coastline. In doing so, they began the long-awaited and much-anticipated campaign to defeat Nazi Germany and to free the oppressed people of Europe from that basic slavery that they were under with the Nazis. Fighting was fierce during the beach landings, and although the process inland against powerful German resistance was initially slow. It took some time to get through the hedgerows and all that in that area. But by mid-August, the Allies were able to break out of Normandy. And after the liberation of Paris in late August, the Allies advanced more rapidly against the German armed forces, which is called the Wehrmacht in German. However, in doing so, the Allies began overrunning their supply lines. They were moving so fast, they were moving faster than they could supply their troops. And they were forced to decelerate their drive eastward toward Germany. Well, this temporary lessening of the Allied offensive maneuvers permitted the Wehrmacht to regroup, and it gave German Chancellor or Führer Adolf Hitler and his generals a chance to execute a countermove against the Allies. So at 5:30 a.m. on December 16th, under the cover of dense fog, which prevented Allied aircraft attacks against the Wehrmacht, the Germans launched the operation, what they called Autumn Mist, which was the strongest and most desperate offensive of the Allied invasion period. Described by the Allies as the Ardennes Offensive and dubbed by the media as the Battle of the Bulge, 18 German infantry divisions, which included 250,000 troops, advanced through an 80-mile stretch of the dense, hilly Ardennes forest in eastern Belgium. The German Blitzkrieg battle plan included the use of 1,000 tanks and self-propelled guns, 1,900 artillery pieces, and 2,000 fixed-wing and jet aircraft. Hitler's objectives in this attack included not only splitting apart the powerful First and Third Allied armies, but also capturing the vital port of Antwerp in Belgium, which the Allies were using as their only forward supply harbor. So a lot of munitions and trucks and tanks were coming in there, so the Germans wanted to stop that. They wanted to attack that and keep it from happening. So they wanted to overrun that area. Well, since the Allies were unable to support their ground troops by air and strafing missions and bombing because of the fog, the dense fog, the Wehrmacht was able to create a 60-mile westward bulge in the American lines and push 80,000 lightly defended soldiers into full retreat, American soldiers. And facing these startling conditions, part of that included the 8,000-man 101st Infantry Division, which was encircled and forced to surrender. So you had 8,000 men that were captured by the Germans, and they were disarmed, of course. So in facing these terrible conditions, the Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower called a meeting of his commanders and staff on December 19th at his headquarters in Verdun, France, located about 250 miles east of Paris. Including in this conference were Generals Omar Bradley, Jacob Devers, George Patton Jr., probably remember that name from the movie especially, and Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder, he was British, and all their staff officers were there. He called this conference. General Eisenhower began the conference with these significant words, and I quote, "The present situation is to be regarded as an opportunity for us and not a disaster. There will only be cheerful faces at this conference table." But why was General Eisenhower so optimistic? Why did he expect his commanders and staff to be as well? Also, why did he view the situation as an opportunity when at first glance it appeared to be devastating? Eisenhower was confident because he realized something important, that the Wehrmacht had actually moved itself into a trap which the Allies could powerfully attack on its flanks. The generals and their staff promptly set in motion a strategy to confront and halt the German assault. Included in this plan was to have General Patton disengage 6 armored divisions of his Third Army immediately from their frontline combat down in the south of France near the Lorraine region. So Patton's tanks and troops moved swiftly north from there. And if you remember, if you saw the Patton movie, I mean, he just stopped everything and sent those guys up there. They were already engaged in combat, and they had to withdraw from that and move a long way north. So these are all American troops under his command there. But anyway, they moved north to relieve the U.S. 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne. That's a small Belgian town near the vital road junction that was the pathway to further German expansion. So they knew they needed to get on that right away. In addition, a joint force of British and American troops led by British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, they were operating north of the German incursion, they moved south. So you had Patton moving north from where he was and Montgomery's forces moving south. This untenable situation for the Wehrmacht, what happened here is the combination of Patton's and Montgomery's forces caused the enemy to be placed in a giant, what they call a pincer movement between, so that they would squeeze these troops and attack them on both sides. And that's untenable for an army to be attacked from both sides. So anyway, that's what the Americans understood, and the British, of course. So when they did this, the Allies, they captured thousands of German troops right east of Bastogne as they were attempting to head toward the coast. And by January 28th, just 6 weeks after the Wehrmacht's initial assault, the Allies had driven them back to their original positions. These are the remaining troops that they hadn't killed or captured. The Allies' success in the Battle of the Bulge resulted from critical strategic and tactical decisions and actions that were taken to slow and finally stop the German advance. But intrinsic to their success was General Eisenhower's optimism when he and his generals were faced with serious adversity. Remember that, because we'll be talking about that, about this basic idea. But again, what does this have to do with us? What does it have to do with us as brethren of God's church today? What can we learn from Eisenhower's confident approach that can aid us in growing and developing spiritual maturity? Well, just as he expected his military team to deal with the enemy threat in a very resolute manner, so does God expect us to bear up under great stress, to stand firm in the faith while courageously facing trials and assaults and sufferings. And some of these last a long time. And I'm sure some of those who are listening today on the webcast understand that, because especially, as you heard from in the sermonette, you get older and things just don't work very well, and it's hard to recover. And so we have a lot of people right here who are probably dealing with things like that right now. Here's what the Apostle Paul wrote to us. In 2 Timothy 2, verse 3, he said, "You therefore," who's he talking to? He's talking to the brethren then and also to us today. "You therefore endure hardship as what? A good soldier of Jesus Christ." You see the comparison there with what happened during the Battle of the Bulge? They had good soldiers that were fighting and were under command of generals that were positive and upbeat and confident. And they moved in that same direction. They overcame the enemy. So how can we accomplish this? Paul gives us the answer. He says in Ephesians 6, verse 13, this is from the New Living Translation, it says, "Therefore put on every piece of God's armor, so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm." The battle. You know, you and I are in a battle today in different ways. Everyone is different, and we have to stand firm. We have to stand fast. This requires, as Paul said in Philippians 1, verse 6, not on your handout, it'll be there later, but he said, being confident of this very thing, being confident of this thing, that he who began a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. God is going to complete that. He wants us to believe that and to live that way, that Christ is going to help us through these battles, no matter how difficult they are. That passage alone leaves us with no doubt that if we faithfully follow Christ, we can accomplish this. There's no doubt. So when General Eisenhower said, "There will only be cheerful faces at this conference table," he was in some measure echoing similar words of Jesus Christ, who addressed his disciples by saying, here's John 6:33, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me," through him, through Jesus Christ and what he did for us, "you may have peace." Peace in the midst of the storms that we face. In the world you will have tribulation. Right? We have it, plenty of it. But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. He's done it. He's gone before us. He's shown us the pathway. So there's no reason why we can't make it. So when we deal with difficult trials and troubles, because we can look at what Jesus Christ did for us by triumphing over sin and even death. So through his resurrection and ascension to heaven, he is our advocate with the Father. He's right there on the throne with his Father right now, hearing and understanding our prayers to him. He's there guiding us. He is the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Yeah, obey. That's a tough thing for this world, isn't it, today? Indeed, as we read in Hebrews 8, verse 1, it says, "We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens." Imagine that, see him on the throne there, and he understands and knows what we're going through, every one of us. Totally understands it. So Christ knew perfectly well that we, as his faithful, obedient disciples, would obtain spiritual victory if, that again is if we remain devoted to him and continued following his way of life, the way of life that Jesus taught. Since we can always count on him to guide and strengthen and help us, we can be optimistic. We can be confident. We can be courageous, just as Eisenhower was, and yet even more so, right? The good cheer Jesus Christ desires us to have is certainly not a momentary respite from trouble, which is the so-called peace that human society gives us. You know, we're looking at what's happening in our country today, and we have a new president, and it's like everything is nice and great. It's going to be that way. Forget it. To me, it's like, you know, the skies opened up. You know, maybe we got a little bit of sunshine, but those clouds are going to close in again because you have enemies, and Satan, the devil, doesn't like success in the world. But it's a temporary thing that happens. That's a so-called peace that human society gives you. Rather, what we want is a durable, divine peace and comfort in our hearts and minds, even when we face these inevitable difficulties and dilemmas in life. Jesus expressed it this way. He said in John 14, verse 27, "Peace I give to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give it to you." And then he says, "Let not your heart be troubled." That's easy to say, hard to do, as we all know. Been there, done that. Let not your heart be troubled, though. Neither let it be afraid. So this joyful optimism is possible because we know that God not only protects and guides us through our physical lives, but He gives us the guarantee of a magnificent future as divine spirit beings in God's coming kingdom and family. And that seems so far away sometimes, doesn't it, when we're in the midst of a painful night and we can't sleep and whatever else is going on. Are we dealing with someone who just passed away, died, and the pain is there? But knowing what God has given us can help us have the serenity that we need when we face adversity, when we face suffering. King David of ancient Israel wrote this in Psalm 116, verse 7 and 8. This is from the New Century Version. He said, "I said to myself," I like this, just the way it's when it's transcribed here. "I said to myself, relax, because the Lord takes care of you. Lord, you saved me from death. You stopped my eyes from crying. You kept me from being defeated." So he went through all of that emotion, and yet he came out the other side undefeated. Why? Because he put his trust in God. That's what David did. No wonder he was a man after God's own heart, right? So just as David trusted God implicitly when he endured hard times, we can rely on our all-powerful Creator to help us contend with life's so many challenges. Again, the Bible is filled with numerous examples and statements showing that God is always ready, willing, and able to comfort and encourage humble, repentant people who are striving to obey Him. For example, we read in Isaiah 41, verse 10, he says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you." These are promises he's telling us here. "I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." God's strength and scriptural assurances like these help chase away our natural human fears. And we all have them, right? And yet, here we have the power of God's Spirit working within us. So that can help us leave worrying and fretting behind. Again, easy to say, right? Not easy to do. But those are the words from God right there. I'd like to illustrate this point with a really remarkable biblical story involving the prophet Elisha and his young servant. Now, this is nothing new to most of us, but let's review it anyway. In Elisha's time, the kingdom of Syria launched military assaults repeatedly against the nation of Israel. And each time, in advance, God informed his prophet Elisha about Syria's attack plans. Then Elisha, what he did is he immediately told Jehoram, the king of Israel, about those so that he could prepare to counter the enemy's forces and defeat them in every battle. Of course, the king of Assyria didn't know any of this, and thinking that perhaps he had a traitor or a spy in his own inner circle, the Syrian king, he called his advisors in, and he demanded to know who this person could possibly be. 2 Kings 6, verse 12 says this, And one of his servants said, "None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your own bedroom." In other words, anything you say, Elisha's going to find out. Even in your own bedroom. Well, the Syrian king learned that it was, when he found out that it was Elisha who was informing Israel's king of the attack plans, he commanded his military leaders to go capture Elisha at his hometown in Dothan in northern Israel. Therefore, here in verse 14, it says, "Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city." Imagine the shock and the surprise of Elisha's young servant who experienced what he experienced when he woke up that next morning. To see the small town of Dothan surrounded completely by enemy troops. Verse 15, "And when the servant of the man of God, Elisha, arose early, went out, and there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And the servant said to him, to Elisha, 'Alas, my master, what shall we do?'" So he's all freaking out. He's just like, what in the world? What are we going to do? So while the sight of this large army terrified this young servant, what was Elisha's reaction? What did he tell his panicked servant? Verse 16, "So he answered, 'Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them.'" I'm sure the servant like, what is going on with my master? It must have mystified this young man. What is he talking about? Well, Elisha then quickly asked God in prayer to make it possible for his servant to grasp the situation's true spiritual reality. Verse 17, "And Elisha prayed and said, 'Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may say, open my servant's eyes.' Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha." All around the city. The servant saw that the entire city was surrounded by horses and fiery chariots, a huge army of angels, primed to protect Elisha and himself from these Syrian forces. We learn what happens next after Elisha prayed a prayer to God that took merely 2 seconds. Verse 18, "So when the Syrians came down to him," he's ready to attack, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike this people, I pray, with blindness." 2-second prayer, right? "And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha." How fast can God answer your prayers? He may not do it that quick, but how fast can he do it? There's an example right there. God acted instantaneously in response to Elisha's request. Verses 19 and 20 go on to describe how the temporarily blinded men were led away by Elisha to a city about 10 miles away. Once inside the city, God restored the soldiers' eyesight, and then they discovered they were captives of Jehoram, the king of Israel. As verses 21 to 23 further explain, by Elisha's instructions, the captives were not mistreated. They were given a good meal, were provided supplies for their journey back to Syria, and they were sent on their way home. This merciful act proved to be a remedy for one of Israel's problems. after that? Feed those who are hungry, be good to your enemies, kind of right there, right? And these soldiers reported Israel's kindness, and after that, all further attacks from the Syrians stopped. What, therefore, is the important biblical lesson that we can learn from this example of God's power, his help to Elisha and his servant? Well, just like Elisha's servant, we may sometimes feel that we are under assault by terrible trials and problems and are tempted to panic. You ever feel that way? Something comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden you're like, oh, what am I going to do? But the truth is, the spiritual truth, the powerful spiritual truth is that we have incredibly more going for us than we have going against us, just like Elisha's words. You and I have in that same situation. We have that relationship with God. Now, often when we've been in the church a long time, God is going to test our faith. He's going to put us through our paces to see if we're going to trust him. And some of these battles last a long time. Some of these trials last a long time. So we have to remember that. We can't be impatient. We have to be long-suffering. You know the old word, long-suffering? I don't like that word, but it is what it is. It's patience. So sometimes in these trials, in the midst of a difficult time, we just don't see God's chariots of fire, right? Just like Elisha's servant didn't see them. When that occurs, we need to ask God to open our spiritual eyes, you might say, so we can recognize the divine forces that God has arrayed on our side. We need to prayerfully seek his help in order to put our full trust in him. And maybe that's a thing we need to. When we go through this, God's testing us. I want to know how deep my brethren's faith is now, or are.